Welcome to Professor Wright. You have a voice. Let's find it. And of course I am the professor, D.A. Adams. Welcome back and welcome to video number 3. We're going to start getting into the meat of the video lecture series now. In video number 3, we're going to start with the basics of the writing process. And we're going to get into just an overview of the writing process, and we'll move into getting into more specific details. Now, to explain why we need some kind of a process, you probably know somebody out there who claims that they want to be a writer. They claim that they want to write for a living. And a lot of times you'll hear these people say something along the lines of, "I write when inspiration hits me." Well, I hope from this moment forth that every time you hear someone say, "I write when inspiration hits me," your crap detector will kick in. Because there's no truer mark of an amateur than somebody who says, "I write when inspiration hits me." Professional writers can't wait for inspiration. You can't wait for an idea to come to you. You have to make the ideas happen yourself. As Jack London said, you can't wait for inspiration. You have to go after it with a club. And I think that's a very apropos statement, a very apropos way of saying it. You can't sit on your hands and hope that inspiration will come to you. Because writers write, regardless of what level you're on, writers write when a deadline demands that you write. So in order to, and the expression that I use for it is lassoing the muse. In order to lasso the muse, you have to have some kind of a repeatable process that you can sit down with, and every time you use it, it's going to produce results. And that's what professional writers typically rely on. And because this works for professionals, you, regardless of what level you are, if you're a student in school and you have a deadline that says, "I have to have this paper done by Tuesday at 9 a.m., if you have a repeatable process that you can follow, that paper is going to be a lot less stressful. And if you have a repeatable process that you can follow and it becomes second nature to you, for as long as you're in school and even when you get in the workforce and have maybe writing assignments that you have to do as far as putting together reports or memos or whatever, if you can stick to your process, none of those activities will ever weigh you down. None of them will ever get to you and stress you out, because you know all you've got to do is fall back on the steps that you know of how to complete a project. And so that's why having some kind of a writing process is so important. So let's get into some specifics about the process itself. We're going to divide this up into 3 different stages. The first stage is pre-writing. Sometimes you will hear pre-writing referred to as planning. Just know that these 2 expressions are used interchangeably. And so if you're studying writing somewhere else and somebody says, the planning stage, you know that also refers to pre-writing along with this lecture series that we're doing. Very simply, pre-writing is all of the activities that take place before you sit down and begin composition. It's whatever you do to organize your thoughts or to gather ideas before you actually sit down and start putting words into sentences and sentences into paragraphs. Good pre-writing serves as a springboard to get you into writing. And the better of a job you do in pre-writing, the easier of a job you'll have when you move on. So we're going to go through in the lecture series, and I'm going to give you several different activities that you can use that will help you either come up with new ideas or organize the ideas that you already have. The second stage of the writing process is writing. Now again, sometimes you will hear this referred to as drafting. Just know, again, these words are used interchangeably quite often. Writing and drafting are the same thing. Drafting, writing, whatever you want to call it, is the act of sitting down and composing your words into sentences and creating some kind of a writing project, whether it be an essay for school, a poem, a novel that you're writing, a screenplay, whatever it is. The actual act of sitting down and putting that together is the writing stage. 2 thoughts on the writing stage. First one, if you have done a good job in pre-writing, this should be the easiest part of the entire process, because you know what you want to say. You've already thought about it. You already have a good idea of what you want to say. You don't have to come up with anything new. You just have to sit down and get those thoughts down on paper. Now, when we get to fiction, we'll talk about how that works. For those of you who want to be fiction writers, there's more to it than just that. But the writing stage should always be the easiest stage. That's the first thing. The second thing that I want you to remember about this for now, this is going to be the most time-consuming stage, because you have to get the words down. There's just no substitute for it. And it takes time and energy to sit at the keyboard or sit with the pen and paper and get those words down. So it's the easiest part, but it's also the most time-consuming part. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Now, the final stage of the writing process is rewriting. Now, there are several different words that are used interchangeably with rewriting. I'm not going to write them all down on the chalkboard here for you. Just know some of them are revising, editing, proofreading, and even though technically those are all three different things, people use those expressions interchangeably to mean the act of taking something that you have written and polishing it into a much more reader-friendly version. And much later in this lecture series, we're going to get into the difference between writer-based prose and reader-based prose, but I don't want to jump ahead too far yet. Rewriting by far is the most important part of the entire process. You see, I've got it starred, I've got it underlined. Rewriting is the thing that separates the mediocre from the good and the good from the great. The willingness to sit down and polish and shape and hone what it is you have to say until it says exactly what you meant for it to say. That's a very difficult process. Rewriting takes a lot of energy and a lot of focus and concentration. The more willing you are to sit down and polish, the better your writing will be. And that goes for regardless of what you're writing. An essay for school, a memo at work, a 500-page novel. It does not matter. The willingness to rewrite is what's going to separate you from everybody else if you want to be good. In fact, rewriting is so important. I'm going to also circle it, not just underline and star it, because rewriting is the thing I want you to remember. This is the most important stage. And this is where you need to have your concentration and your energy at the best. So that's it for video number 3. When we come back for video number 4, we're going to start into the very first step of pre-writing, an activity that you should always do every time you sit down to write anything. So please join us again for video number 4. And if you will, please visit us at the website, daadams.com. You can join us there for some vocabulary building exercises and also a feedback forum. And I'm also going to have some weekly book reviews of, if you are an aspiring writer, these are books you should be reading to improve your skills. So thank you for joining the Professor Wright video lecture series. I am the Professor D.A. Adams. See you next time.